Mic's a little off today. All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. I am joined today by Commissioner Harrison, Deputy Commissioner Briscoe, Stephanie Mavronis, the Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement, and of course, a Baltimore legend, Mr. Troy Staten, founder of More Than a Shot. We are here today, and we have to be real and honest. For far too long in Baltimore, we have overburdened our police, in particular our patrol officers, by asking them to be all things to all people for all things. We've been allowing a culture in our city where our patrol officers spend 80% of their time responding to non-emergency items in an emergency fashion. This, of course, while violence continues to plague our city. Residents throughout our city, no matter where I go, consistently ask me to return our department to the days where their patrol officers are actually doing just that, proactively patrolling, being in the places where they are needed, building relationships with residents, businesses alike, and actually being able to spend their time proactively engaging with our residents. And we will not be able to tackle this violence if we do not address it from every possible angle. And that means investing in community-based solutions, working on a ground to build a set of Baltimore, funding highly intentional and impactful violence intervention and deterrence efforts, like establishing the CVI ecosystem and launching the group violence reduction strategy. But it also means rethinking the way our police department operates. Building a real public safety requires us to develop legitimate solutions to more effectively and efficiently and appropriately deploy law enforcement resources when and where they are needed. That's why I'm proud to announce today the next round of initiatives in our larger plan to reimagine the way BPD performs and operates. In line with my commitment to reforms guided by knowledge and real-world expertise, the aptly named Smart Policing Initiatives, or Strategic Management and Alternative Response Tactics, is what it's officially called. This is an innovative, data-driven, and a smart transformation that will put more police officers out in our community doing what our residents not only need them, but want them to do, working with them to deter and, of course, to solve crimes. This is not a new thing. For those who may be confused, this is something that I have been fighting for and that you have been covering me about the entirety of my time in city government. And we're going to be now seeing this come to full fruition simply because I have the power as the executive to demand it to be that way. Smart policing covers the following areas: providing alternatives to BPD responses for behavioral health crisis and non-emergency calls. As you all know, we are running a 911 diversion pilot program and are looking to expand that. Reducing response burden on officers for non-injury and non-DUI related traffic accidents by engaging a third-party vendor to respond to these calls, which take up an enormous amount of time for our patrol officers in the city of Baltimore every day. Expanding the use of telephone and online police reporting to better serve the public while also eliminating the need for sworn officers to respond in person to non-emergency calls and low-priority calls in an emergency fashion. Working with alarm companies and local officials to reduce false alarms in Baltimore, specifically in residential capacities. And for more information on how the Baltimore Police Department is utilizing smart policing, we ask you all go to baltimorepolice.org. And I want to say again that this is about using our resources in an effective and efficient manner. Our patrol officers should be patrolling. We have grown a culture in Baltimore over many generations where they are not patrol officers. They are call takers. We want to go back to the days where we can have our patrol officers being just that. We need to move away from having them go lights and sirens out to things that are not emergencies. We should not be doing that. We shouldn't have been doing that. 911 was created for emergencies, and this smart policing program will allow us to join many jurisdictions around the country who have been long moving this way and allow our city to have more free time for our officers to be proactive, building relationships, being in areas, focusing on areas where we're having violent crime, building relationships with community members, with business members, with young people, everyone in our city, so that we can work collectively to make the city a better place. And with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Harrison.
Good morning, and thank you, Mayor Scott. As the mayor mentioned, we are here today to discuss another step forward in our reimagining of policing in Baltimore. Smart policing, which again stands for strategic management and alternative response tactics, are designed to provide a more complete and appropriate response for non-priority and non-emergency calls for service. It allows our officers to spend more time investigating and solving crimes. It allows us to improve officer response times to those high priority crimes and ensure a complete response for those high priority calls. It allows for more of our patrol officers' time and resources to be spent on community engagement and proactive policing, and improves our officers' working conditions. These measures will make our officers more available for proactive patrols, again, in community engagement. Additionally, it helps with job satisfaction and retention because sworn members often prefer to be out on the streets policing and patrolling and deterring crimes and apprehending people who commit them rather than just going from call to write reports. Some of the programs that the BPD will be implementing as part of the smart policing are alternatives to police dispatch, outsourcing traffic accident management to a third-party vendor, diversion to telephone reporting unit and online reporting, and lastly, the false alarm reduction. As previously announced by the mayor, the BPD's telephone reporting unit will receive enhanced capacity by hiring civilians to give sustainable staffing to handle the following types of incidents: larcenies, lost or stolen property, destruction of property, shoplifting, abandoned or stolen vehicles, and nuisance complaints. It does not mean that we're giving up on crime. It only means the initial response changes. The BPD has demonstrated through its telephone reporting unit that these calls for service can actually provide a more effective and faster delivery of service to our residents when these reports are taken over the telephone or taken online. We're targeting the first week of July for the first phase implementation of the Smart Policing Program, where our dispatchers will begin referring all of these calls for service types to our telephone reporting unit, instead of dispatching an in-person police response. In addition, with the support of Mayor Scott and his administration, we're seeking to modernize our local ordinances to reduce the frequency of false alarms and not require a police response to a location that has recorded more than 5 false alarms in a single year. Finally, we're moving forward on launching a pilot program for traffic accident management that is handled by a third party, as you've heard. With more than 100,000 non-injury, non-DWI accidents that occur annually in Baltimore, this additional support will allow our patrol officers to focus on higher priority issues that affect our city daily. Again, to file a police report online, residents may go to baltimorepolice.org. Working together, we are transforming the BPD into a modern, world-class enforcement agency that is equipped to meet the challenges of the 21st century policing. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to our mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and thank you for your commitment to evolving the way that we operate here in Baltimore. And last, I'll turn it over to Mr. Troy Staten, who is a stalwart in our community, to talk about this from a community perspective. Sir?
Good afternoon. And with that being said, the smart policing initiative that will allow Baltimore City PD to focus on intellectual development laws, enforcement resources, and more effectively combat violent crimes. With that being said, more simply, a lot of the police and the more serious crimes will be more freed up with some of these non-effective, not even non-effective, but some of these other issues that aren't priority crime, you know, such as small cases such as like larceny, loss of stolen property, destruction, shoplifting, abandoned, stolen car, and nuisance complaints. Those things will go to the SMART, where the more serious offenses will free up the police to do what's necessary, as well as have the police more interactive in our community, patrolling, building community relations, which once was established in the community once upon a time, to bring that back into our community. So it's not like it will not be no non-policing. Policing will still be effective, but now we have areas where we can direct to non-emergency calls and responses and give the officers and the police units more freedom to do their job a bit more effective within our community. The smart policing decreases, it takes time for effective officers to respond to these calls, allow officers to spend less time in non-emergency cases, calls, and work more effectively, like I said earlier. Allowing and improve officer respond to high priority to calls, allowing officers and to remove and be a bit more effective in our communities. The goal is to have our community members support the smart policing, because we know that our communities with us focus more on violent crimes, to have more time in community engagement with residents, foot patrol, and to be out of the community versus going on calls 80% of the time, which are non-emergency calls. So that frees up everything, brings us back into policing and community, what brings forth more effective results for which we once had in our city with relationships, policing, community engagement, and it also frees up the non-emergency cases to collaborate with other community-based organizations who work with these non-essential issues in our community. So what it does is it structures our communities and our city in a much more healthier approach to policing our community and allowing the police to do their job, and we address the issues in our community as we do our jobs in our communities through our community engagement, community relations, and community fellows that works together to help us restructure and bring back our community and our cities back individually, community by community, each city as a whole. So that allows the community engagement partners, organizations that's in our communities to do their part more effectively with the police and with the city. And that's the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Staten. And with that, we'll take questions.
Is this on? Yeah,
Yeah, you're good.
Mayor, I had two questions. One was about vetting of these civilian employees after the story a few weeks ago, and what steps have been taken to make sure that the civilian employees are properly vetted.
Yeah, we know that we had this one incident. We consistently hire our civilian employees here in the police department. They have a very robust, I'll let the commissioner talk about that. And then we're also going to be still having Director Herbert, who will shortly report back to me on things he wants the department to improve. But we're going to continue to do that. And I think it's very important, Mike, to know that TRU already exists. We've already taken over 8,000 of these this year, right? We've already taken over 1,100 online this year. This is about expanding that for work that is already happening, that should have been happening many, many moons over a decade ago, right? I first started talking about online reporting and TRU reporting in Baltimore writ large in 2008 when I was a staffer. We had a press conference that I believe that you were at, sir, in 2013 about online reporting. It just has gone underutilized. This is about now utilizing something that we should have been doing a long time ago to allow our police patrol officers to actually have the time to do just that. When you ask residents in Baltimore what they want their police to be focused on, they're not telling you they want them focused on somebody's planter got stolen or someone's package got stolen. They want them to be in the neighborhood looking for individuals who are doing that, building relationships, being on those corners, interacting with people with illegal activities happen, making sure they know who the business owners are in their community, making sure they know who the young people are in their community. That's what they want. But what we're not what we're allowing them to do right now, because we allow folks to send someone lights and siren out to every little thing.
And Mayor and Commissioner, I didn't know if there were any updates on two particularly heinous crimes, Angel Smith, the pregnant woman, and Jasmine Brunson. I noticed there's a new reward in that case being offered. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll let the Commissioner give any updates and the Deputy any updates that we have, but I'll just say that we will not rest until we find these people who did it, period. Sir?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mike. Detectives are following leads. There are leads that we are pursuing as we speak. More often than not, we're still looking for individuals who know what happened, who saw or who heard what happened, to come forward and provide that so we can connect the dots. Many of the cases that we have cleared and closed and made arrest on have been with community support and information provided to us. This is no different. We still need that. While we're pursuing leads, we still need more information. And regarding your first question, we've hired a new HR director for the Baltimore Police Department, and while the audit is being done, the investigation is being done to see what needs to be fixed, we know that we had to make sure all of the protocols are being followed the same way by all of the members. And the technologies that we use to vet people in those investigations are all being used the same way, with oversight to make sure everybody follows the protocols and there's fidelity to the program. So we are making sure that that happens, because sometimes it's a technology issue, sometimes it's a human issue, sometimes it's both. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Good morning. 2 questions. First for Mayor Scott, and this may be a question for you as well, Commissioner. You mentioned other communities that are already utilizing this. Can you talk about some of the surrounding communities or law enforcement communities that are utilizing this right now?
Well, thank you for the question, Brittany. I'll focus mainly on large cities because it's more of an apples to apples, but for example, Phoenix is actually going through a very similar progress. If you look at the folks that I talked to, Charlotte, Mecklenburg has been doing this for years. Most major cities have had a very robust online reporting and telephone reporting thing for years. Essentially, it's just been Baltimore that has been unwilling to do that, and that's really about the leadership at the executive level.
Okay. And second question, this one is addressed to the Commissioner, but you both may want to answer. So I know you mentioned previously the department is short a little over 300 positions as far as the police officers are concerned. Are there plans to fill those kind of before the summer, before we see kind of an uptick in crime sometimes when the weather gets warmer? Are there plans to fill those positions?
Well, there's always plans to fill vacant positions. That initiative is 365 days a year. We move as fast as we can without compromising quality or the integrity of the hiring process. Every city in America is having this challenge, and believe it or not, while we have a challenge hiring to fill more than 300 vacant police officer positions, there are cities who are far worse. Mayors who talk to this, mayor chiefs who talk to me about their difficulties, which are far greater than ours, believe it or not. But yes, we are working every day to hire the best and the brightest from Baltimore, and anyone who wants to move to Baltimore to join this police department and make us the 21st century police department that we're working to become.
Okay.
And I'll just to add into that, Brittany, the truth is that we have Academy class, I think, 2 right now, right? Classes in the Academy, they're going to consistently do that. We're going to consistently recruit from everywhere. We're actually even working on the front end to make sure that we build more of a robust, growing it through our school system, working with our partners there. But I think the Commissioner raised a point that is very, very important. Mayors around the country were together in D.C. not that long ago, and I was one of a very few that were able to say that we're actually hiring and producing police academy classes right now. We know this is an issue for us. We're looking at ways to do more things. We had a new contract to raise the salary up to entice more people to come. We have all kinds of incentives to do that. We're going to continue to try to fill those vacancies as quickly as possible, knowing that folks have to go through the proper training as well.
Okay, and last question, do we have the manpower right now to make sure that all of those neighborhoods that do see a lot of the crime are covered in terms of the new patrolling efforts that you guys are doing?
Well, we would always like to have more, but this initiative is about being smart in how we use the resources that we have and making sure that the resources we have are dedicated to the real problematic issues and that we're not spending our time on things that pull us away from those problematic issues. This is what this is about. And by the way, this is also about retention. Everywhere I go, the roll calls I go to every week, the officers complain about working conditions, which is, by the way, the number one reason people leave organizations. Pay is number 4. After upward mobility and fairness and equality in the selection and promotion process. Pay is number 4, private and public sector. We are working to improve the working conditions with new police vehicles, with improvements to police stations. Now the working conditions in the field on the calls they go to, we really want them focusing on that. So this is about working conditions to improve job satisfaction, which we believe will improve retention as well.
And I'll just add, Brittany, as I know you're done and go to Alexa, but I think it's also about thinking about what we're talking about today in a real sense, right? If you live in West or East Baltimore, you want your patrol officers to have free time to actually be on the blocks where people are getting shot, not worrying about a stolen package that an investigator can follow up on and figure out, and even allow you the data to be deployed in the area with free time to catch people are doing those things. This is why we're doing this, to allow our patrol officers the time to be where they need to be talking to and with who they need to be talking with. Alexa?
So you guys mentioned the smart policing will improve response times. What is the average response time, and how much time are we shaving off?
So right now, our average response time to emergency calls is anywhere between 7 to 8 minutes, which is well below the target of 10 minutes of response time to those emergency priority calls. But it's so important to realize that every time we're talking about some of these non-emergency priorities, a false alarm, for instance, it'll tie up an officer anywhere between 15 to 30 to even 45 minutes trying to fully investigate and clear that burglar alarm that went off, and in fact, there was no burglary. One moment, please. And so part of what we're trying to do is make sure that all of the time that's being spent in patrol is most efficiently allocated. And so the more time we can make available, pulling away from these non-emergency, non-priority calls, the more available time those officers can be to respond to those emergency calls for service, to a shot spotter alert, to a shooting, to a violent crime that's in progress. Part of what we're trying to make sure of is that in instances where there is no imminent danger, there is no person whose life is in jeopardy, we're trying to make sure that those calls are receiving the same and consistent level of policing services, which can be provided much more quickly through online or telephone reporting, and that's what this program is about.
Okay, so there's not an exact number, but just overall, because it's relieving resources.
Well, for every call that we don't have to go to makes us more free and available to respond to the calls we do have to go to, which thereby gets us there faster and appropriately.
How quickly do you envision seeing results, crime reducing as a result of the smart policing?
Well, this is about making sure we utilize our resources effectively. Once again, some of the strategies don't always equate to offenders changing their mind on whether or not they're going to commit a crime. But it is about us using good management and using our resources appropriately. For every minute we can spend patrolling and being highly visible and engaging, we believe some crimes can be averted and diverted and deterred because we were there, as opposed to flying past it to take a report and then coming back to take a report because a crime was committed. Not all violent crime, maybe some property crime. But we believe by being visible and engaging, we can deter more of it instead of having to come back to take the report because we weren't there in the first place.
Good morning. When we're talking about crime, we're seeing a lot of, or more young people getting involved either as victims or suspects in some of these instances. Do you think that some schools in Baltimore City that are underperforming are connected to the crime problem that we're seeing in Baltimore right now?
I think that everything in Baltimore is connected to what we're seeing in the crime problem in Baltimore. We'll start with the historic disinvestment into neighborhoods that these young people come from that was done through racist policies, the historic disinvestment into those schools that were also done through racist policies, right? We're talking about and with the evolving nature of it too, Mackenzie, not just here, but around the country on what's happening with young people and even older people, as if we did our deep dive into the Western District when we were doing the group violence reduction strategy. It wasn't young people that were most at risk, it was 30-year-olds that were most at risk. And what we're seeing is a complete and total connection in every facet of life in Baltimore, coming from obviously starting with individual decisions, but also environmental and cultural things that are impacting it. Everything in Baltimore, even from what they see on their TV stations at night, is connected to what's happening in the city.
Would you say that the schools right now are setting students up or young people in Baltimore City for success, whether that be college, VOTEC, any sort of post-high school education?
I think that your station would know the best about what young people are doing from college in Baltimore, as you all are the sponsors for the College Bound Foundation, and know about the millions of dollars of scholarships that they give out every year. And we know that so many more of our young people are actually pushed out for success than the few that we unfortunately are not. And we know that we have to be better every day. I'm never going to accept, as a VOTEC graduate who chose to go to college, we're going to continue to evolve that, right? Part of the new Kerwin funding is not just about funding for the buildings. It's also about how we're changing and modernizing the systems that we have to make sure that the CTE education that our young people have today means that they're going to be connected to jobs and opportunity. And that's something that I am digging into as well, as someone to help make those connections. We're doing the same thing with our police and fire department to modernize tracks for young people there. We have to make sure that more young people have access to college and other opportunities from Baltimore, which is why we continue through the College Bound Foundation to find out more ways to not just get them there, but to keep them there via funding, but also support them while they're there, because we know that young people, when you're coming from a place like Baltimore, sometimes you have family pools that pull young people back in. And because you guys are the sponsor, I would just ask that you could do a deep dive into what College Bound does for us and how many young people who have came through that program now, thousands and thousands, and what we are doing in the city and around the country.
Let me ask you this. If more students were coming out of school prepared and they had a better path outside of high school, do you think that the crime in the city would be lower? What
I'll say, Mackenzie, is that crime and why people commit it isn't that simple. As many times as you guys try to make it that simple, it's never going to be that simple. We know people who went to college, who graduate from college, who have been arrested for committing a violent crime. We have to evolve again our way of thinking when we're talking about making these connections. Sometimes it is connected to how someone grew up or what their situation was or their education. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's because someone just chose to make that decision, or they fell off, or they, became addicted. Everything is not as simple as you want it to be. We have to think about it and treat them as individual cases and understand how we fix the system totally. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I was just wondering if you guys could talk a little more about the pilot program that sends social workers in lieu of officers some calls. Like, what results have you seen, and what exactly are the plans to expand it?
What I would say that we should give you a direct follow-up on that. We know it's a part of our consent decree and others. I want to make sure that any information we share with you, we can actually share first without running afoul of anything. But we'll make a direct follow-up.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you all.